When Pakistani Field Marshal Asif Munir landed in Tehran today, he was escorted by F-4 Phantom fighter jets and MiG-29 fighter jets, which apparently don't exist anymore, according to Trump, because he said that he had actually obliterated all of them. I think he must have said it upwards of 100 times over the course of the first installment of this war. It was initially reported that there may be Islamabad talks between Iran and the United States, direct or indirect, wasn't actually made clear, but people were saying that these may take place either tomorrow, Thursday, or on Friday. Well, it turns out that that was a bunch of BS, because Iran did confirm through Sarah Massoumi, a well-known Iranian diplomatic journalist, that that is not the case. But what is happening is that a Pakistani delegation would be coming to Tehran today to follow up on Islamabad talks. All right. Apparently, multiple indirect messages have been exchanged with the U.S. and Iran since last weekend. Most recently was yesterday on Tuesday. But the report suggests that the Pakistani Field Marshal Asif Munir, when he went to Iran today, he was carrying the fully thought out, I guess, if you can even call it that, message from the United States to the Iranians. And from this point onward, Iran was to make a decision about how they want to proceed with future talks with the United States. There's discussions, rumors as to whether or not the talks will take place in Islamabad, Pakistan again, whether they will take place in Istanbul, Turkey. I don't think anyone's really talking about Oman, but, there's a lot of options here. So this is what happened. Pakistani Field Marshal Asif Munir arrived in Tehran today to convey a message from the United States to the Iranian delegation. Iran publicly stated for the first time since the war that they are open to negotiating their allowable rate of uranium enrichment as long as the levels are high enough to continue civilian nuclear needs. Now, even this would be absurd and unthinkable under the U.S. demands. The U.S. demands are no uranium enrichment for 20 years, and Iran must dismantle all their enrichment facilities and infrastructure as well as their nuclear facilities. Insane. Iran saying, look, we're not going to do that, but we will, allow the IAEA to come in here and to monitor and say, you can only have enriched uranium up to this level, right? And as for their 60% enriched uranium, I guess that they would probably downgrade that. If you can do that, I think you can do that, right? You can downgrade the level of enrichment. I have no idea. Anyways, so Iran has stated that that's what they want to do, or they'd be willing to do. But that would not even be acceptable under the maximalist U.S. demands that were put on full display in the Islamabad talks. Now, I must remind you that under the JCPOA, under the Iran deal, which I still think was a terrible deal for the Iranians, I don't think they should have ever accepted that. That was crafted by the likes of, Javad Zarif, for example. I think that was a terrible, terrible, terrible deal. If you've been following the channel, we've been tracking Saga Metals, trading as SAGMF in the United States and Saga, SAGA in Canada. Back in January, they led a massive drill program in Labrador and were uniquely positioned to answer the U.S. government's billion-dollar push for domestic critical minerals. What they've done in the last 4 weeks has changed the scale of the company. They didn't just hit their targets, they achieved a 100% drill success rate in all 36 drill holes. And the big news is Saga just acquired another titanium asset in the same district as the largest titanium mine in the world. They scooped it from under Rio Tinto, a top 5 global mining giant worth over $100 billion. If a company like that was circling the same ground, it's a pretty strong signal that this story deserves your attention too. We have to look at this for what it really is, a U.S. national security imperative. Titanium is now a designated defense metal because you can't keep the U.S. operating without it. By funding domestic supply chains, the government is turning a major strategic vulnerability into a North American fortress. The Trump administration recently launched Project Vault, a $12 billion critical mineral stockpile plan aimed at breaking foreign dominance and reshaping the mining sector. And that's not all. An additional $30 billion was announced at the Critical Minerals Ministerial to accelerate domestic production and secure strategic supply chains. Saga Metals sits right in the path of that incoming capital. As the U.S. and its allies move to secure the future, Saga is positioned exactly where the money, the mandates, and the momentum are flowing. This is more than a resource story, it's geopolitics. The Pentagon is actively funding domestic supply chains for the exact minerals Saga has in the ground. This is not wishful thinking. It's a White House directive. And Saga isn't sitting still. They're systematically assembling what's shaping up to be a massive North American titanium district with the potential for one of the largest discoveries the region has ever seen. Saga Metals is a company I'm watching very closely. If you want to learn more about this critical mineral story, check out the link in the description below. And a special thanks to Saga Metals for making today's video possible. But under that deal, Iran was allowed to enrich their uranium up to a certain level. It was only after the U.S. pulled out of the deal unilaterally, while Europe still remained in the deal. The U.S. pulled out. They made up all this BS. They pulled out under the Trump first administration. And what happened? Iran said, okay, well, per the terms of our agreement, per the terms of the JCPOA, we are now allowed to enrich our uranium up to 60% because the U.S. unilaterally pulled out and applied sanctions against the Islamic Republic of Iran. And the deal was that if the U.S. did something like that, Iran's course of action, recourse would be to, in a reciprocal move, enrich the uranium past the allowable limits that had been set while the U.S. was still party to the deal. After the meeting between Asif Munir and Arakchi concluded, Iran stated they will conduct necessary reviews to reach a decision on the next round of negotiations with America. An Iranian source also told Iran's Tasnim news agency that they expected that the expected ceasefire in Lebanon is a positive sign for Iran's decision on the next round of talks. We'll be talking more about that in a moment because as we sit here, right, it's nighttime in Lebanon and in Israel. As we sit here, the Israeli Security Cabinet was supposed to have met tonight to discuss a one-week ceasefire in Lebanon. But as we sit here, Lebanon is still getting bombed. Tyre, southern Lebanon, ancient religious city, getting bombed right now. And not just Tyre. Bin Jebel is also witnessing fierce battles between the resistance fighters and the Israeli occupiers. So take that into consideration as we hear this news that, oh, the ceasefire in Lebanon is a positive sign. Well, that's what Israel was initially saying. Israeli Khan News said there's going to be a ceasefire. We'll agree to a ceasefire under pressure, right? And then Israel came out a few hours later. Khan News published again that actually, no, we're saying we're not going to agree to the ceasefire because we feel as though that Iran and the Pakistanis forced the U.S. to demand this from us. So no. Okay, so we'll see how that impacts the potential future talks. Iran called on the United States to adhere to a logical framework for the negotiations and not hinder the process with the excessive demands or violations. Yeah, I'm not holding my breath. Also interesting, when Pakistani Field Marshal Asif Munir landed in Tehran today, he was escorted by F-4 Phantom fighter jets and MiG-29 fighter jets, which apparently don't exist anymore, according to Trump, because he said that he had actually obliterated all of them. I think he must have said it 30, 40 times over the course. No, more than that. More than that for sure, because, it lasted, 38, 39 days. So he probably said it upwards of 100 times over the course of the first installment of this war. Another interesting point here, Asif Munir, he's a man who is consistently changing his outfits. When he initially welcomed the Iranian delegation in Islamabad, he was wearing military garb, his field marshal military garb. And then when the U.S. came, he was wearing a suit and tie. And now that he's in Tehran, he's wearing, well, he actually landed in these clothes right here. He landed wearing his military gear. That was a photo of him earlier today. And now he's wearing a suit with no tie. Reason for that being, it's not a sign of disrespect. It's actually a sign of respect to the Iranians. If you notice, the Iranians, they just have one little button here. They have like a tiny thin collar that goes around and one button. No tie. Ties are seen as Western American, Anglo-American influence and a sign of distrust. So this was done as a matter of respect to Iran and Iranian culture today. He knows his audience. What can you say? Now, at the same time that these talks are taking place, well, not talks, but indirect communication is taking place, and Iran is saying, hey, United States, we're taking everything into account right now. Don't violate the ceasefire. Don't renege on your promises, right? And we see that the Israelis are already violating the ceasefire in Lebanon, and at the day that they were supposed to agree to a ceasefire once more, this is now the fourth time they said that they were going to do a ceasefire in Lebanon, and then they've backed out of it at the last minute. We not only have those sorts of violations, we also have economic, financial violations from the United States as well. Of course, apparently, one of the offers that the U.S. made in the Islamabad talks was that some of the $6 billion would be unfrozen in Iranian bank accounts abroad. The Iranians claimed, and I think it was also Business Insider claimed, that the U.S. had agreed to release all $6 billion. Of course, none of it was actually released, right? But the U.S. claimed that they would release some of the $6 billion. Well, I guess that was all a pipe dream. That hope has now died because U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says they are pressuring banks all over the world to seize Iranian funds. So now they're actually they're violating this all even further. They're trying to unilaterally, illegally seize more Iranian funds because the $6 billion is not enough. We are partnering with our Gulf allies. They are much more willing to share the bank accounts of members of the Iranian regime. We are reaching out to banks, including Chinese banks. Any Iranian goods purchase are forbidden. Scott Bessent also went out this morning, U.S. time, and once again threatened Chinese banks over Iran. This is what he had to say.
I don't have an update on the tariffs, but I do have an update on sanctions. Iran is used to be the largest state sponsor of terrorism. China was purchasing more than 90% of their oil, which is about 8% of China's energy needs. We believe this blockade in the Straits, there will be a pause of Chinese buying, but I will tell you that two Chinese banks received letters from the U.S. Treasury. I'm not going to identify the banks, but we told them that if we can prove that there is Iranian money flowing through your accounts, then we are willing to put on secondary sanctions.
Are you? Nick, go ahead. Thank you, go ahead, Nick.
Just a quick follow-up. Can I just on my question? Sure.
I just think it's hilarious for a number of reasons that it's just such a brain-dead strategy. Okay, so Scott Bessent says, well, we're not going to identify the banks, but we have, we have come to understand that some Chinese banks, two Chinese banks or something may have been transferring some Iranian funds. Therefore, we send some letters to them, some stern warnings that we're going to sanction them if they continue with this practice, right? Why I say this is so stupid is because out of I think there's like 7,000 plus different Chinese banks, like bank branches and whatnot, 7,000. You know how many of those are state-owned in China? Almost all 7,000. So what does sanctioning one or two of them do, really, when there's 7,000 other branches that are also owned by the same exact government? In China, only 0.1% of all of the banks, 0.1%. So 99.9% of all the banks in China are owned by the state. 0.1% are private. Okay. That means about 14 of like the 7,000 plus are owned by, I don't even know if it's fully private. It's probably like private-public partnership. They probably even still have to follow government dictates. But the other 7,000 are like fully controlled by the government. So what are we talking about here? What are we doing here? We're sending strongly worded letters to, 2 out of the 7,000 plus state-owned banks in China. Give me a break. Now, this is an interesting point regarding one of the demands that Iran has made. They say that the U.S. has to get out of the region. Obviously, I think most people kind of assume that the U.S. may leave some of the bases for good, like those in Iraq, for example, maybe Bahrain, Kuwait. But will they leave Jordan? Probably not. But, the Iranians will probably get them out of a good number of these bases in the region. Well, the Saudi foreign minister, Faisal bin Farhan, delivered a speech today, actually this was yesterday, saying Saudi Arabia and all Arab countries do not set their policies based on the interests of others. They set their policies based on their own interests, regardless of viewpoints. He went on in this speech talking about how, we're not going to be vassals of anyone. It kind of feeds into this rumor that's been circulating that Saudi Arabia may replace the U.S. military presence in their country with a Pakistani, also nuclear power, country, a Pakistani military presence when this is all said and done. Also, given that they've signed a new joint security deal with the Pakistanis. That could be. It has yet to be seen. There's no real proof of it yet, but it is something that is being discussed. And also, we have, this is a last point here. Iran and the U.S. are apparently considering extending their ceasefire for 2 weeks. Israel also expects to extend the ceasefire with Iran. I guess they better hope so for their sake, because as long as they don't commit to a ceasefire in Lebanon, the Iranians are not going to be too happy about that. And as the days go on, I can only imagine that it's more likely that something is done about it. Before you leave, I want to say thank you for the support, because after 2 years of being banned, we are finally back home on YouTube. So be sure to subscribe to our channel and also join as a member on our channel using the link at the top of the description. I rely on the generous support of viewers like yourself to get the truth out to as many people as possible. You can also support the show on Locals or Give Sin Go. The mainstream media and the powers that be are never going to stop attacking us for bringing the truth to as many people as we do. Thank you so much for your support.